Hello, I'm Frank Conkling, and this is Panda Consulting's ArcGIS workshop. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into the Parcel Fabric alignment tool. This is a tool that only comes when you're using the Parcel Fabric, and it's one of the best tools for going and helping to take care of those conflicts or figure out where parcels don't align together. Quick reminder, lower right corner has our QR code, takes you to our website. We are ESRI business partners, first in the country to get the parcel management specialty. And we'd love for you to go and look and see, and we'd love to help you with any of your projects. So let's just talk a little bit about what we're going to do today and what we're going to look at. Our is going to be the Align Parcels tool. We're focusing around that. But it's not just going to be how the tool works, but we're going to talk about what it's really doing so that you understand a little bit more why you might be a little confused or a little frustrated if you're not quite sure how it's going to work. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the transform tool and the align tool. But then we're also going to look at alternate approaches, other tools that you might use. And we're going to look at the merge parcel points tool, the shrink to seed tool, and the reconstruct from seed, because the Align Parcel tool, as great as it is, and it is a great tool, there's times when you just need to do something beyond what it's originally capable of doing. So let's just go ahead and start here. All right. So the Align Parcels tool, let's just start with this. The tool is set up so that once you have a parcel selected, once you have an active record, it will allow you to go and take that and analyze what's around it, and then decide how you want to go and adjust things. And to go and illustrate this, I'm going to just start real quickly with an example here. I'll go ahead and I'll create a new record and run through this whole process just so we can go through this. And I'm going to go to the traverse. I'm actually going to cheat a little bit. Oh, we got this mismatch again. Let me go and fix that real quickly and remind everybody what that is. So it turns out that my project here has a projection that's not an international feed, but is in US survey feed. But by default, ESRI now wants to use the international feed as your default. And when we have project data in survey, US survey feed, but our document in international feed, it gives us that warning. So let's just change it to there and it will go and do away with that. By the way, I just see that Chris just put up. If anyone who's here right now has any questions or comments or want me to go and talk about a little bit more, please put them over in the chat window. Chris is watching it, and he will make sure that I stop talking for a little bit and address those concerns or those questions. All right. So I'm starting a traverse here, so I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to import a file from here. All right. This is, by the way, using the ArcMap traverse format when it comes in. And you can see there's my start point here. Here is what my actual parcel looks like. I'm going to adjust my start point a little bit and make sure that I'm snapping to the point there so it moves it over a little bit. While I'm at this, I'm also going to go and just remind everybody that when we're doing this, we want to make sure that we are on the same basis of bearings as what the legal description is and what our data is. So I'm going to actually make an adjustment. I'm going to put a ground to grid correction on here. Now my first, it looks like this is now on azimuths. This is what happens. Let's go back here again to properties here. You can tell by the way that none of this is north azimuths. In fact, we want to be in here. All right. Let's go in and start again. Let's go to traverse. Let's and go parcel lines and go and import this again. Here now we actually have this. All right. The start point has been set correctly. Here is our first bearing here is south, 8827 or 5720 southeast. So it's this one going this way. We're going to set a ground to grid on here, in which we're going to go and set that. And this is, again, 88 and 5720 southeast. And this is a quadrant bearing south. And once we click on that, it's next, and it tells us or asks us to go and show what is that actual line represented on in here. And that's not, I'll do it this way. I'll cheat a little bit. Going and saying parallel. And when I click on parallel, it will now apply an adjustment to all of the lines in my traverse so that they are in fact parallel, and it's applying that adjustment to these lines. Let's see if I can actually go and see them here. If I go and say, let's select the lines that are inside of here, and it will show me that in fact there is a rotation going on with all those to correctly go to that. So I have a traverse here that I've input in the workflow. I then go and create a seed, which I'll create the seed for this parcel, and I can go and build it. Now, when I've built it, it's now at this point that the Align parcel comes in. Now you have a parcel, it's being created, and it's being created according to how our, our traverse was input. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and get off of the traverse tool so I can see that my red dot disappears. And then if I go and say align parcels in here, I have a couple options in here. Note what it's doing is it's actually going and taking my selected features, which at the point are those features which are inside my active record that I just built. It's taking that and it's going and buffering it. And it's buffering it by this first tolerance. In this case, it's doing 25 feet on each side of my boundary of this parcel. And that 25 foot is important because it will only go and adjust things within that tolerance. So for example, if I look down here, I can see that this point here, which is where this is supposed to go or it's supposed to be adjusted to, is not within that 25 feet. So I'm going to have to increase this to make sure that it at least falls inside of that. Let's go to 32. Now let's compare the rest of those. That's fine. That's fine. And that's fine. Now, the next thing is usually set some sort of a anchor point. This is the point that you're going to maintain and make sure you keep. Since I use this point here as my original tolerance point on here, I might need to make an adjustment to this traverse, maybe move it over. I might decide to go and move this over to here. Let's try and figure out what's going to happen without this. If I do it and say don't, it says best results is if you have an anchor point in here, and I don't have an anchor point. But what I have told it is to take my selected element and adjust it so it fits into my existing data. So it's taking the cyan colored selected feature and giving me a preview here of taking that aligned part or taking that new parcel and aligning it to fit over. All right. It's also showing me some other information. For example, I have a snapping tolerance of 5 here, and it's showing me whether or not there might be some points in here and where they're going to go. Here's one here. It's another one here. So the question I often get is that which way do I do this? Do I take my new data and adjust it to fit into my old data, or do I take the old data and adjust it to fit to the new one? And we get into a philosophical quandary here in that often you're told, well, just take the new stuff and use that because that's more accurate. And that's not true. The new stuff may not be more accurate. The new stuff may be more precise, meaning it's measured with a better instrument than the old stuff was. But in the United States, at least, the location of a property is not defined by the dimensions that are shown on any deed. The location, the exact location of a property is defined by the location of the monuments to the corners of that property that were set by the original surveyor that first laid it out. Not any surveyor since then, but the first surveyor that laid it out. So that, and this is a very strange component of at least in the US, is that if that original surveyor measured incorrectly and gave you a wrong dimension, but put that monument someplace differently, the location of the monument holds. The location of the monument is more important than the actual dimensions that are shown on that legal description. It's a call to the monuments, is what they are. So that if you get some new information in that's more precise, does that really mean that that's a better place to put this new parcel? It comes down to a further evaluation where you have to say, what do I know about the corners that I have already in my data? And this is where, yeah, maybe it's not a bad thing to take the new ones because most of us do not collect or store information about the corners. But maybe we should. Maybe we should begin, if we want to do this correctly, to start collecting information about what these points represent. Were they an original new corner or it was something that somebody found? And what type of a monument is that? Because in reality, in the United States, that's more important than the bearing or the distance or the area that's included within that document. It's where the original monument was. So I think we need, as cadastral mappers, as parcel mappers, we need to start being and paying more attention to the points. It's a little bit tangential to our discussion about this tool, but this tool allows us to go and define how do we adjust these lines and the polygons to fit into existing data? Do we adjust the new to fit the old? And that's what this is doing here. It's taking that new parcel, which is in the cyan, and adjusting it to fit against the old data I had. Or this option here says toggle between the new and the old. And instead of using the new data, make that new data fit into the old and say, now let's generate this and see where this new parcel is going to be. And it will show you that this new parcel or the old parcels are going to move over to here is where this is going to go. So inside of the Align Parcels tool, we have the ability to define how do things move here? Which way do they move? And that's something that each time you do this, you have to make a decision. Which way do you want to go and adjust this? Do you want the new data to be adjusted into your old one if you're comfortable with the locations of that? Or do you have to take this new data and use that as the new location of these corners and adjust your old data into that? Again, by toggling this back and forth, you can see which way it's going to go on here. And again, I can toggle it and say regenerate this so I can see where it's going to go, or I can then toggle it again back and regenerate it so that now the new one is going to go into the old one. And once I do this, and I can go and hit the Align, it's actually going to make an adjustment on there. But the question is, how is it actually doing that? So let's look and see some of the components that it created, and it didn't even really show them to us. So down here, when we told it to generate something, it created a link. And this link shows us the differences between that one point and the other point. In this case, this is almost 30 feet. Up here, in this case, this is 10 feet. Over here, 4.82 feet. And here, it's 26.16 feet. So what this tool is actually going to do is take those linkages, those linkages between known points, and use those to try to figure out how to adjust the polygons, the lines, and the points within this parcel. I'm going to drop back down and I'm going to look at the tool that actually is doing that. All right, so let's cancel this out and let's instead move over here a little bit and do a little bit of experiment with this other tool. So I'm going to clear this out. I'm going to go and I'm actually going to create a polygon. And this is just a polygon. And I'm going to use this just for demonstration purposes. All right, this polygon. And I'm going to use the transform tool. The transform tool allows us to create linkages to show us where these vertices on the features should be moved. So on here, I can create and say, I want this to go here. Note, it gave me the distance and everything else. And I can say, well, this goes here. And this goes here. And this goes here. Let's purposely make it whacked out a little bit. And once I have a couple of those in here, I can then define what the transformation method should be. And I have several to choose from. I have what's called an affine transformation. An affine transformation is the most rigorously, the mathematically rigorous transformation we have. And it looks at it all and attempts to find the closest adjustment that can occur to go and satisfy all of these, in this case, 4 conditions. You have to have at least 3 linkages to be able to use an affine transformation. So when I go and tell it to transform this, that polygon is going to be adjusted. Note it's not exact because of the way it put in there, but it was close. So that's the affine transformation. I'm undoing that so I can use those linkages again. Well, there's also this thing called a similarity in 2D. And if when I do that, I can look at how that one adjusted. That one adjusted a little bit closer, and still not the same. Wouldn't satisfy what I'm looking to do. There's also a rubber sheeting using a linear adjustment on there. And that one's actually probably the closest one that we'll find. And you'll note it actually went and took and rubber sheeted that feature to fit exactly where those linkages were. All right. That is the rubber sheet linear. And then here's the rubber sheet with natural neighbor. And that one's almost exactly the same also. Now, those adjustments, those rubber sheeting adjustments, are dependent upon the number of linkages you have and attempt to go and make it fit as close as possible. So that with the Align parcels, when we tell it, look at this tolerance, this buffer that I've created, look for points that are close to the ones that are on the feature that I want to adjust, and find the points and create these links for me. And it goes and creates them in the links feature class. Now, if I open up this feature class here, if I open up this feature class and look at it, I'll see that right now I don't have any in there because I've completed my adjustment on there. But before I did that, let's go and do this now. And if I open up my links here, I will see that I have these links in here because those are the ones that are used on here, whether they're generated or digitized. Now, these first four, these are probably left over because I never really closed out of my Align parcels, but it'll tell you whether or not these are digitized or whether these are aligned in here. And as you get off of this tool, or as you use the tool and finish it, it clears that out every single time. So the links feature class is used exclusively for two tools, the transform tool and the align parcels tool. That's the first type of adjustment you have on here. And let's just go ahead and do this adjustment again so we can see this. Because then we also have this other thing where that line is not connecting to other lines or what in the ArcMap parcel fabric we used to call line points. And that tool is not the transform tool. By the way, let's get off of this. That tool is actually called Align Features tool. And that Align Features tool will act similar to that. And let's go in and put a transform in here and say, let's go and adjust here. And what I'm going to do is purposely tell it to go parallel to this line and move over to here. Let's make this out a little bit more. And I'm going to tell it to take every vertex, whether it's adjustment on a corner of a point, or whether it's a point, or whether it's a vertex on a line, or whether it's a vertex on a polygon, will take every vertex and adjust that so it goes and moves so that it will fit on my path. All right. So when I do that and click Align, what it will do is it will go and take that feature, matter of fact, if I click here and say Align Features along a selection, it looks at everything that's been adjusted, excuse me, everything that's inside that tolerance that's being displayed and moves it. So it realigns or recreates the geometry in the shape field of those other elements that are inside of that tolerance. All right. Now, the thing I didn't pay attention to here was whether or not I had any topology in here or whether it was going to go and delete something because it was located inside that. Often, if I have a topology on here, for example, this is the parcel fabric topology, and I had a line or something that was within that tolerance and it would have gotten deleted, it would give me what's called a topology graph error. Topology graph error, if you've got that, that means that the adjustment that you're attempting to do with a line feature is going to go and delete something. It could be deleting a sliver polygon, it could be deleting a line. If it's going to delete something and you have a topology established or set up, it will go and automatically give you that graph error. When that happens, what you need to do is turn off your topology, remake your selection, and then tell it to go and do it again. And it will not give you a topology graph error because it will go and make that adjustment and not check to see whether or not you're deleting anything. All right, so when I look at, let's take this and let's delete all this out of here. Let's go back to my original one here. And let's recreate that same traverse. And let's go in here, traverse. Let's go and import that again. Here it is here. All right. And there it is. Let's go ahead and set that start point again to here. So we'll move that. That happens to be that the first line of that traverse was there. By the way, because I'm still in the same edit session, I haven't told it to turn off. It actually assumed I was going to use that same ground to grid correction, or as we as surveyors often call it, the basis of bearings correction. It's going to apply that same one on here. That's the reason why it's straight this time and not the other. All right. So now thinking through this, I can go and tell it, just go ahead and take this new line that I'm creating and adjust it to fit the old things. And when I do that, I can say, okay, align parcels in here. I can go ahead and tell it to select. Oh, I didn't tell it to go and create a seed or create that parcel. Now I told it here, let's go and tell it, I thought that was 30 in here. That was 5. Let's tell it to generate these, and it will generate that and adjust it. Now I know that what it's doing is this first tolerance where it says move within, that's how far out do I want this tool to look for points to see if I have matching points or points that are within that tolerance for where my points on my new parcel are. And it will look that far out to here. So if I go and adjust this back here and say regenerate this, note it didn't move this because that's not within that tolerance. And it would give me an incorrect answer. So if I go and change it back to 30, and each time I make a change on here, I have to tell it regenerate this. Tell it to generate it again, and now it will keep and move them all to within that same tolerance. The important thing with this is A, know whether or not you want to adjust your new parcel to fit against the old, or whether you want to toggle it and fit the old to the new. First thing. Secondly, you want to look at the points that are within here and see whether or not they are within the tolerance, and make sure that they are within that tolerance before you do that. And each time you make a change here, tell it to regenerate this and see how it fits. See whether or not it's going to give you what you think you're going to be finding or looking for on here. These are important. Make sure you do that. If it turns out that you still have other elements in here, so this move, this element here, this move within, this is for the linkages. This snapping tolerance here, this is for the Align feature tool. That's the width of that tolerance that the Align feature tool is going to go and do to try to straighten out lines that are within there. So it's going to make those fit. Those are the two tolerances that are important. This snapping tolerance is often defaulted to like 1 foot. I like to use it a little bit more, especially when I've got tolerances this much on the actual tolerances for my linkages. So I try to bump that up, and each time I'll regenerate to look and see what it looks like and see if it's going to go and give me what I think it should be giving as far as the results here. All right. Again, whether you want to toggle, whether you want to go, which way do you want to adjust it, how you can adjust it. Make sure you have the show preview on. Make sure you change, anytime you change the tolerance, you regenerate it so you can see what that preview looks like, and then move forward. If it turns out that you've got points in here that it's attempting to go to a closer point than what you think it should go, you can interactively delete it. And then you create your own and say, no, 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 I don't want to go to that one. I want to go to this one instead. That's what this create is. First, delete the existing ones and then create the new ones and then tell it to align. All right. The Align Parcel tools, it's an amazing tool. It's crazy how much it actually does for you and how well it actually works, but you have to understand what it's really doing in there. It's actually using the transform tool, and it's using then the Align feature tool to go and make sure that the lines themselves and the boundaries align up with those other existing lines and boundaries that you're adjacent to, whether or not they even have points on them. All right, let's get off of here. Let's go back here. That's Align Parcels. Great tool. It works well if you understand what it's attempting to do. All right. Well, again, the transform tool recognize that you actually have to tell it what the linkages are on here and where they're supposed to go on here, and it will create and it will take whatever is selected with the topology that's on here, take what's selected and move the selected elements for you. But you have to go and create the linkages, and then you have to tell it what type of a transformation, if it's an affine transformation, or whether it's rubber sheeting, or whether, you know, or whether it's a similarity transformation. You need to go and tell it that and then say transform. Again, the nice thing about this is that it's pretty interactive. You can always undo that transformation and redo it with a different one. Make sure you have the linkages on here. But this tool is built into Align Parcels, so you may not need to play around with it as much as possible. The Align Features tool, again, this is one of my favorite tools inside of Pro, and it's amazing what they've got. This is actually available, as is the Transform, in non-Parcel Fabric, but the Align Parcels puts them all together for the Parcel Fabric. Again, just know that you want to make sure that, and this is important, make sure that it says it's going to fit the shapes to the path and not snap the lines to the end path on here. That's a recent change that was put in place where it's starting to default to this instead of here. Well, for using the tool to make these changes, you want to make sure it's this top one up here. Secondly, make sure that it's going to go and allow you to not have to select everything to make that transformation. And just watch what's going on when that happens. All right. So here's a couple of things, a couple of tools that are also useful when you're using the parcel fabric and you're looking at some of these tools. And let me see, I think I have a couple other here. So this is one. Let's go ahead and select this. I think this is the new parcel here that I have. And let's go and activate this record. All right. And let's just select everything inside of this record to see. This is a new parcel. And I will run into problem if I try to go and use Align Parcels for this adjustment on here. And this happens usually when you have some sort of natural feature where you've got some sort of river or creek in here, or you've got a big change as far as a creek or something like that. And there's big changes in here. And there's a couple tools that I suggest we use on this. And I'm going to go and show you some of these. Some of these, for example, if I look at the quality tab, I have a tool called Merge Parcel Points. All right. Now, when I merge parcel points, let's go and clear that out. When I merge parcel points, what this does is it allows me to draw a box around a group of points and then gives me the option to say, how do you want to go and merge these together? If I use point number one, it will change the geometry of my current features, which is that new parcel. If I use number two, it will take the geometry of the old one and move them in. And you can see how, rather than using the Align Parcels tool here, I can use this tool to go and change the individual geometry of this to get a little bit closer to where I wanted it to be. So in this case, I'm going to say, let's go ahead and move point number one over to point number two. And that will allow me to go and make that change in here. By the way, it highlights the things that it changed afterwards. And let me go and draw a box here now and say, let's move this over to two. And that moves it a little bit better. All right. Now, before I do anything else here, let's go and show you that. Let's get off of here. Now that I've done this, well, I've got to go and take this point and move it over to here. I've got a choice. I can say, all right, well, let's merge points here and say, maybe this one goes to two. I can do it that way. Now, those of you that are parcel mappers know, well, what happened with the COGO information that was stored on here? Well, it actually went and kept the Kogo information. It did not recalculate it for me. So it's going to be showing me the old distance here, even though it's now got a different shape length on it for that line. That may or may not be what I'm looking to do. So when I'm doing this, I may want to go and label this to see whether or not it's valid. By the way, in that new parcel, I don't have any Kogo dimensions on it. So that's one of the things you want to be aware of when you're doing that. When you're using merge points, is it's changing the length of the line without changing the Kogo values. It's changing the location of the point at the end. Oh, let me go and drop out of the GIS mappers hat and put my surveyor hat on. So what it's really doing is it's going and changing and redefining the location of the monument at the end of the corner for that parcel. So I'm taking that previously mapped and saying this is where the actual monuments are. It's a different way of thinking about what this is actually doing. So that's one of the things I have here that I have to have an issue with. All right. So again, let's make clear on here. Here is my new parcel. And the rest of these are existing parcels in here. Maybe I go up here and say, well, let's take these and make these the same. Make them all over to one. All right. And clean that up a little bit. Now, I can go and make some really, really dramatic changes here in which I could maybe use the align features tool here to align this line and the polygon up to here. Not going to do that because it's such a large adjustment on here. Instead, I'm going to use a different tool. I'm going to use a tool called Shrink to Seed. All right. So I'm going to take this tool and I'm going to select that parcel and I'm going to select that parcel. Those are the two parcels that I need to adjust to the new boundary that I have. And when I say shrink to seed, what this will do is it will shrink that polygon to a seed here and to a seed here. It kept all of the existing attribution on there, but it shrunk them to seeds. And now what I can do is I can go in here and I can select these old lines here, not here. Let's get off of here. I can select those lines and I can actually delete them. I can select this. I don't want to do that here, but I can delete that. So I can select all of this, delete that. I can select this. I can select this. Yeah. And unselect that and delete that. I can select this. And I can delete that. All right, let's go and delete that again also. Now, what am I doing here? I'm actually redefining the boundary of those old existing parcels here. Now, if I note on here, I've got one parcel here, so I've got this line here. If I attempt to tell it to reconstruct, this seed will not form a closed polygon. So I'll have to make sure that when I'm deleting lines in here, I'm going and correcting them or making sure I have them in the right place. Often what happens is that people will go and start using the shrink to seed and not have a record in place. I'm going to tell you, make sure you have a record of some sort. In this case, I have the record for this parcel is active. And I'm going to go and create a line here. And this is going to be a parcel line. And I can just tell it to go to here. All right, so at least that line, just to verify it for you, I have a created by record on here. So I have an active value in there. Now when I go and do this, when I do the reverse of the shrink to seed, it's called reconstruct from seed. Now what that does is it takes the actual seeds themselves and expands them out until it meets the closest line matching the same parcel type. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same record, but it has to be the same parcel type line, and it builds it out. It also then goes and does a build of this, build of the extent to make sure that it fits correctly. So now let's make sure I've got this all in my view, all in my view. When I do a reconstruct from seed, I now have redefined the boundary between this new parcel and those other adjoining parcels without having to use the Align Parcels tool, but recognizing this new line, this new boundary that I have with this parcel is going to go and supersede over the others. Again, this type of a process is often used when you've got water boundaries and natural boundaries or those sorts of those, those winding boundaries that change often on there. And that was a combination where I selected this, I had my new record in here. I said, okay, let's shrink the adjoiners to seed, then go and make alignments or make adjustments to the boundaries of that new record and the existing records, deleting lines I don't need, adding lines I did need. And then once I was sure that it was going to go and form a closed polygon, I told it to go ahead and reconstruct these from seeds. And it then went out and looked at all lines meeting that same parcel type. In this case, we only have one parcel type, which is a parcel. But if you have multiple parcel types, you have subdivisions or lots or whatever, it will look for that same parcel type to go and rebuild it when you're going and doing that. This is a really interesting approach to making alignment adjustments when you're doing things. Let me see if I have another example here on here. Again, this is an interesting one in which I have that same sort of thing. Let's go and select this parcel. Again, just that parcel, activate that record. And just to prove it, here's everything that's activated in that record. Okay. And if we're going to adjust that to fit up to this new thing, we're going to make a couple different assumptions on here. A, what are we going to do with these points that don't match up? How are we going to do them? Is this something that needs to occur? Actually, I did wind up putting that in there. Let's go in and show you one of the things one of the idiosyncrasies about the Align feature tool that I want to make sure you understand. If I go and do an Align feature here, Align feature, all right, and I tell it I want to go from here to here. And I'm going to go in 80 feet's a little bit much. 70 feet. All right. I'm going to go and do it here. If I do this Align Features tool, I look right now, I have no topology on here. It will go and take this and move this over. All right. Now, when I look at that, what I see is that it's actually moved on here. So let's look and see where the features that are part of this point. Here is the new point. Here's the old point, and it actually bent that old line in there to fit onto the new one. So just be aware of it's going to bend all those features that are inside of that tolerance to match. It will also go and do things like create points or bend lines and not move points onto them. So, and this is important, my recommendation is anytime you use align features, you immediately follow that with an or a build extent. A build extent will look at all features. It actually will look at all records inside your current view extent and rebuild them to see if there's anything missing. So I can say rebuild this extent. It will go and build this extent out. Looks like it has done that. And then I can go in here and start looking at, well, let's look at merge points here. Those points, let's go and we want them actually to be on 2. So it's going to delete an extra point that was left over from before on there. So align features, and let's go and show you this a different way of why it's important. Let's go in here to align features again. And in this case, 60, and let's just say here, so you can understand a little bit more how align features works. All right, so this is now going to go and bend this. Let me go and draw this again. And I'm going to go and do it here. So it's going to go and bend that, and it's going to take these two lines and make them fit along this path. It's also going to take this point and move it perpendicular to that path. So the vertices that are inside the tolerance actually get moved perpendicular to the path that you draw. So it's going to go and move those. So it may move them together, but it may no longer be on the ends of those lines. So let's go and do this and check and see if this works. So align. All right, and let's do generate again inside of here. And it looks like I drew it so close. It actually is. But you'll often wind up with multiple points in there. In this case, I only have one on here because it moved it correctly. But you'll wind up with multiple points in there. You just want to look out for that as you're going through and doing this. All right, build extent. Build extent is a good error check to make sure that you've not moved points off of the ends of their lines, or you've not gone and adjusted lines so that they no longer have the points that they need. So build extent used a lot when you do this. Merge parcel points, really useful for these types of things when you're going to do this. Shrink to seeds allows you to do it and shrink your polygon to a seed. You can make adjustments to the lines afterwards and then tell it to reconstruct that on there. If you're drawing lines, you should have an active record so that those lines that you just draw actually have an active record on it. And then reconstruct from seed will allow you to go and do that. Before we go and let me go and finish this one example here. This is my polygon. This is my polygon that I'm going to go and work on. I'm going to shrink everything else around here to seed. So I'm going to select the polygons. There's no polygon here. There's a polygon here. There's this polygon here. There's this polygon here that are all impacted by this. I shrink them to seed. I then go and say, let's remove this line. And let's uncheck this line here. Let's unselect that line. Let's delete those. Let's go in here. Delete that also. Uncheck that and delete that. Now let's go and make these changes that we have to make. Again, looking at this, we've got something here we've got to go in and build. We have an active record so that these lines that we're creating or lines that we're adjusting, they're going to be part of this active record. We could tell it to go ahead and extend this out to here. All right, we can tell it to go in here and do intersects, line intersects between here and here, and between here and here. And we can tell it to take this one and this one and delete them. And I think I can tell it to go ahead and reconstruct from seed here. And it looks like there's something here that's not. All right, here's another tip. Let's turn off our points here for a minute. And let's look at the vertices and nodes tool on here. And let us see where, in fact, we have dangles. And if we look here, we can see we don't care about our vertices or our nodes in here, or even the pseudo nodes. We want to see dangles here. So we want to see where this dangle is. There's a dangle out there. Ah, that dangle wouldn't allow this other part, which was part of this other, to go and build. So let's go and here, let's make sure that we take and draw a new line here. We could have extended that just as easily. And we say reconstruct. Oh, oh, there we go. Reconstruct from seed. So what we've done is we've gone through a couple different sequences and looking at how do we make adjustments on existing elements in here. If it's a simple adjustment, we can go ahead and use our Align Parcels, make it fit, determine which way we want it to go and fit. But if it's more complex, especially if we've got some sort of natural boundary on there, it sometimes is easier just to go and use merge parcel points, align features, or to go and shrink to seed, reconstruct our new boundary using the new boundary for that new parcel that we have, and then building from there. The tools that we just saw were everything from go ahead and do the merge parcel points, do the shrink, reconstruct, look at showing us the nodes and looking at dangles in here. And those are all useful tools that are built in and very, very helpful for this. All right. I think we've dived down as deep as we can into this. So the question I have, is there any comments or any questions? I don't see any in there.
None in the chat.
Thank you. So if not, we're going to stop the recording and then stick around. Let's have some more comments on this. All right. Thank you. See you next time.